Hi, this is Bill Flanagan. I'm the conservation manager here at the John Ball Zoo, and today we're going to be talking about the 10 species of turtle that are native to Michigan. Michigan, being a Great Lakes state with lots of freshwater wetlands, has a really rich diversity of turtles. And I want to show you the different species and how to identify them. The first one we're going to talk about is the common snapping turtle, which many of you are probably already familiar with. It's our largest turtle in the state, and they're pretty distinguishable by size. Also, they have a serrated back edge to their carapace, which is the top part of the shell, and they have a really long tail. They're the only species of turtle in Michigan with a long tail. We've got one right here. I'm going to pick him up so you guys can see. At least I think I'm going to pick him up. He doesn't want to be picked up. So here he is. You'll notice that I've grabbed him by his hind legs instead of his tail. If you look at the back of the shell, you can see his serrations aren't that great, but he's got lots of serrations along the back. He's got this sort of dinosaur-looking tail and a great big head. And they're a lot bigger than any of the other turtles that are found here in Michigan. At least adults are. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about handling snapping turtles. The best way to handle them is this way, to not do it. And if you have to handle a snapping turtle, to help them across the road or something like that, you want to stay away from the front part of the face. They have a really long neck and they can zip out a surprising distance, so you don't want to go anywhere near that face. So you want to approach them from behind. You'll see a lot of popular videos or photographs of people holding them by the tail. I don't suggest to do that because you're putting a lot of pressure on that tail and you can actually hurt them that way. So what you want to do is either grab them by the back of their shell and lift them, or you can grab them by their hind feet. This guy's kind of used to us, so he doesn't give us a lot of trouble. But you want to be careful of those feet because they'll try to scratch you with those feet. Another thing, if you have to help them across the road, if you have something like a floor mat in your car, you can always shoo them onto the floor mat and drag them so you don't have to actually handle them. Another tip I like to give people is never put a snapping turtle in your car because they give off a really strong musky odor and you'll never get that smell out of your car. Now if you want to put it in your buddy's car, that's a different kind of thing. So this is a box turtle. I'm going to take a moment just to explain a couple of terms that I use when I talk about turtles. It's carapace and plastron, and they're just fancy words that mean top and bottom shell. So carapace is the top shell and plastron is the bottom shell. And we'll use that term when we describe markings on the shell or features like the hinge that this box turtle has. So this is an eastern box turtle. It's kind of a special turtle or a rarer turtle here in Michigan. It's a turtle that is endangered because of habitat destruction and also the pet trade. So this is definitely a if you care, leave it there kind of animal. And you'll see he's demonstrating one of the reasons why we call it a box turtle. There are only 2 species of turtle here in Michigan that can do this. They have a hinge on the bottom of their shell that allows them to completely close themselves off to protect themselves from predators. You'll notice also that it has a very domed shell. This is one of the few turtles in Michigan, this is one of the only turtles in Michigan that spends all of its life on land. You very rarely find them in water. Although they can swim, some people are surprised to find. And I think Keith talked about how you could tell a land turtle by how domed the shell is. A flatter shell is much more hydrodynamic and can move through the water easier. You see he's getting comfortable, he's sticking his head out. These guys tend to have dark colored shell with lighter patterns on them. The patterns can be highly variable and they're really pretty. You see this one's got bright red eyes. Sometimes males have bright red eyes, but that's really not the best definitive character because females will have kind of reddish eyes and sometimes males that aren't in breeding condition won't have red eyes. But if you see one with really bright red eyes, that's usually a male. So this is Michigan's state reptile. The state reptile of Michigan is a painted turtle, which was actually as a result of a letter writing campaign from grade school children. So it's a pretty cool story. And it's also one of the most common reptiles that you see around Michigan. They use all different types of wetlands, and a lot of times they're the kind of turtles that you see crossing roads. And this is the kind of turtle you might have to help cross a road. Wanted to point out, this one's got super long front claws. With painted turtles and red-eared sliders, the males have especially long front claws that they use to tickle the female during courtship. These guys have kind of flattened shells, so they're mostly aquatic species that swim through the water, and that flattened shell helps them go through the water with ease. They also have bright red and yellow markings all along the underside of the plastron and especially around the face. So that's an easy way to tell them, especially from a distance. The plastron has unique little patterns on them. Sometimes they're pretty defined, sometimes they're kind of faint like this. They can be mostly yellow, they can be mostly dark, but each one of those little patterns is a fingerprint that you could use to identify this individual. So this is a really cool turtle. This is a Blandings turtle, and they use all different types of wetlands, and they move from wetland to wetland. So they kind of move for long distances over land. And you'll notice that it's got a domed shell, but not quite as domed as the box turtle. So this is a turtle that's is both adapted for being in water and walking across the land. They tend to be larger. They have dark shells with some yellow pattern. This one's kind of worn and the yellow is not quite as bright as some of the others. They can also have like a completely dark and stained shell. One of the ways that you can tell a Blandings turtle from the other turtles in Michigan, see that bright yellow chin? Blandings turtles are the only turtle in Michigan that have that bright yellow chin. So if you're looking through your binoculars at turtles in a log and you see one with that bright yellow chin, you know it's a Blandings turtle. The other thing that's interesting about them is they're the other species of turtle in Michigan that has a hinged shell. Theirs can be variable. Some individuals have a hinge that works really well, and others it's not as flexible. But they're similar to the box turtle. In a lot of cases, they can shut themselves up in their shell a little bit better to protect themselves from predators. They're also known from a study that was done over on the east side of the state of Michigan. A long-term study has discovered that these guys, oh, he's peeing. A lot of turtles pee when you pick them up, so if you're going to pick up a turtle, be aware that they might start peeing. I think that tends to be a defensive behavior, so imagine if your hamburger peed on you when you tried to eat it, you probably wouldn't go back to that restaurant, so it's a defensive behavior. But these guys tend to be really long-lived. A long-term study of these guys on the east side of the state discovered animals that were in their 80s that didn't seem to be showing signs of senescence or old age. So they laid just as many eggs, even more, in their 80s as they did when they were younger. So these guys really are a long-lived species. So this is a red-eared slider. This is an interesting turtle in that it's really common in the pet trade. And one of the sort of unfortunate aspects of that is a lot of people find that this is not the best pet for your house, and then they get stuck with them. And unfortunately, the outcome is sometimes people inappropriately turn them loose in the wild, and that can pose a risk to wild turtles. So there are some native populations of red-eared sliders in Michigan, but most of the ones you see are probably the result of released pets. And in fact, this species has spread all over the world because of that problem. But to see these guys, if you see these guys in the wild, they're flat aquatic turtles, so they have that flat shell. They're a little bit bigger than some of our other native turtles. The most defining character is that red ear. They've got this red mark behind their eye. So they look a little bit like painted turtles, except for they're a little bit bigger, and they have that one big red blotch behind their eyes. An easy way to tell the difference between them and other turtles, especially through binoculars looking at basking turtles. And they do not have a hinge on the belly of their shell. They're also a species, if you see one with a really long claws on the front feet, that's usually a male. So this is a map turtle. These guys tend to be more in rivers and streams and fast-moving water. Sometimes they'll wander into slow-moving water, but they're almost always in rivers and streams. So here in the Grand Rapids area, this is a turtle that you commonly see basking on logs in the Grand River. They're called map turtles because if you look at the skin around their face and around their legs, between their two shells, they have lots of yellow lines or reticulations that reminded whoever named this turtle of the lines on a map. They have similar lines on their shell, and they tend to be kind of an olive drab green to brown color, but sometimes wild turtles have algae growing on their back that sort of obscures that. I've noticed too, when I look at them through binoculars, their beak, they don't have teeth, so they have beaks like a bird, tends to be a little bit lighter color than a painted turtle or a red-eared slider. You'll notice I've been handling these turtles, but when I do, I try and keep my hands away from their face. Even though it's not a snapping turtle, any turtle can bite. And your best course of action when you see a turtle is to sort of admire it from a distance, but if you have to handle it to move it across the road or something like that, then be very conscious of keeping your hands away from its face so you don't get bitten. And wild turtles will sometimes scratch you with their claws if you hold them. So you have to be careful to sort of hold them away from their feet and hold them away from their face. This turtle here is a musk turtle, or also known as a stinkpot, which is my favorite common name for them. This is a large adult male, so they don't get very large. They're one of our smallest turtles. They like our clear streams here, or clear lakes here in Michigan. And they have a little bit of a dome shell, little guys with a great big head. So they don't look a lot like many of our other turtles here in Michigan. There he is. He's going to show you a little bit of his face. One interesting thing with these guys, if you look at his plastron, he has a little bit of tiny little front part of his shell that almost forms a hinge similar to the box turtle or the Blandings turtle, but it's nowhere near as well developed. And then he's got all this flesh between the different scales on his plastron. Males have that and females don't. So if you see one and it's got all that little fleshy stuff between the scutes on the belly, then you got a male. So this is a wood turtle. This is a really cool turtle that's found in the streams and rivers in the northern half of the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. And this is a species that's been declining because of habitat destruction and predators like raccoons being much higher in population levels because of how well they do around human habitation. But they're known as a wood turtle because the annuli, or these little growth rings on the shell, tend to be very visible, and it almost looks like they're sculpted out of wood. They tend to have a lighter brown colored shell, and then they have some orange or yellow highlights around their face and their legs. And they're a turtle that's rare in Michigan, and we're really interested in what their populations are doing. So this is a spotted turtle. This is a turtle that's rare in Michigan and all throughout its range. They specialize in shallow wetlands with a lot of emergent vegetation, so the kind of wetlands that are really endangered throughout the spotted turtle's range and are really important to protect. So we're really interested in any information that people have about spotted turtle sightings. As you can see, they have a dark shell with bright spots, and they're one of our smallest turtles. This is kind of a small adult or a large juvenile. And they have a dark belly, and then they have bright orange or yellow faces, which he's hiding from us, that have a mixture of yellow and orange spots. A lot of times when you see these guys in the wild, the spots tend to be obscured by the stains from the tannins in the water. Remember I said that those wetlands have lots of plants, and as those plants sort of decompose down in the water, they give off a lot of tannins, and so their shells can be kind of darkened and stained through those tannins. But you can almost always see those bright yellow spots on their head and their face if you see them through a pair of binoculars. So the only native turtle to Michigan that we don't have represented here at the zoo is the spiny softshell. So I brought this book by David Mifsud and Jim Harding about the reptiles and amphibians of the Great Lakes. This is a good book if you're interested in the reptiles and amphibians of Michigan. To show you some pictures. They're pretty distinct. They don't look a lot like any of the other turtles that we have here in Michigan. They've kind of traded that hard shell for a soft leathery shell that's very flat. And they're totally aquatic. Occasionally you will see them basking up on logs or rocks that are just coming out of water. And they're found in larger permanent bodies of water like rivers and streams and big lakes, or some of the small freshwater lakes that we have around Michigan. Here in Grand Rapids, I commonly see them basking on the rocks in the Grand River right here in downtown, so that's kind of cool. They have an extremely long neck, and a lot of times they'll bury themselves in the sand, so the only thing that's visible is that neck poking up. They have this really long skinny snout that's like a snorkel that's distinctive to these guys.